You're locked into the only podcast for Maine high school basketball. The biggest names, past and present. It's Big Time Hoops, the podcast, right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Big Time, the podcast here. This is Big Time as it gets with our guest tonight. We got legend. We got one of the all-time legends. We got Matt Rossignol joining us tonight. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
Very well, thanks, Tom. Nice to be with you, and thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. This is one of the big episodes that I had in my mind when I first came up with the podcast. So this has been a long time coming. So I'm glad we can make this happen. But we were just talking before we just started recording here. So school year wraps up for you on Wednesday. So a little bit of a busy time of year right now, or how are things kind of wrapping up for you?
Well, this is usually a weird time of year anyway, at the end of any school year. But with the coronavirus and kids not being in school doing remote learning, it's been weird to say the least. So I hope that we can get this problem resolved, because it hasn't been the best environment for teaching kids. But I mean, I got to give a lot of credit to my colleagues and teachers throughout the country for making do with an unusual situation, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So for most of our younger folks, they may know you as a coach and an educator. They might not know you for your exploits in the basketball court. So we're gonna go back to the beginning here. We got to tell the story, but I mean, you're not completely forgotten, because there was just a poll that was done a couple months ago. They asked who was the greatest basketball player to ever come out from Maine, and you made the finals in that poll.
Yeah, I lost to Cindy Blodgett, which I should have. I probably should have lost a few rounds earlier, but yeah, that's, it all depends on who wants to spend a lot of time voting, I guess is what it comes down to. So maybe some family members felt some loyalty for me there and helped my cause a little bit. But
it's got to feel good to not be forgotten, though.
I guess not. It's fun to be mentioned, just to be considered, an important person in basketball, I guess is enough of a good feeling.
So let's go back and let's find out why you're considered one of the all-time greats. So Van Buren boy, right? Born and raised?
Yeah, 1967, 53 years old.
So Van Buren was a little bit different back then than probably what people know it as right now. A little bit of a bigger population. So what was Van Buren like growing up when you were there?
Yeah, well, first of all the storefronts were filled growing up. We had a population probably 4,000 or 5,000 people. When I played at Van Buren, they were a Class B school for all my 4 years of high school. And actually, if you go back to the mid-'70s, it was a Class A for soccer. The graduating class of 1975 at Van Buren had 215 seniors.
Wow.
And now we've had classes in Van Buren that have had 15 seniors. So
a little bit different, yeah.
Potato farming was huge, and potato families had a tendency to have a lot of children, and the population was just bigger. And I think we're seeing that not just in Van Buren, but throughout Maine. So yeah.
Those of us that are from the county, we know the Rossinols, but for those that aren't familiar, just what kind of household were you brought up in? Obviously, you got some brothers. What was the upbringing like?
Yeah, very competitive household. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. My oldest brother's Mark, who owns county physical therapy businesses throughout, not just Aroostook County now. He's expanded to Bangor, Maine. So give a little shout-out plug for him there. It's a great job with getting people back to work or back to playing sports competitively. I have another brother named Brian, who's an engineer, also an artist. He's about 11 months younger than Mark. I'm the 3rd child. And then I have a sister, Valerie, who's a doctor in Blue Hill. I have a brother, Luke, who's a lawyer in Presque Isle, and I have a sister, Jana, who's a business owner, spends half the time in Florida and some time here in Maine. So my mom and dad are John Rossignol and Mona Rossignol. John, my dad was an electrician. He's 79 now, still does a little bit of work. My mother's Mona, formerly Mona Bouchard, Junior Miss Maine, 1958. So that's where I get my looks, right? Yeah. Yeah. So now, fun household, very competitive. Our parents encouraged us to play sports. I was always tagging along my older brother, so I think that kind of motivated me. Because early on, I couldn't compete, but it motivated me to want to get better.
Yeah, so it's curious, like, back then I feel like, growing up, sports were a way to get out of the house, and your parents were probably like, go out, go play, come back when it's dark type thing. So was your introduction to athletics more that, just like something to do, or was it because of your older brothers? Like, where did your passion come from?
No, my father was a basketball player in high school, and apparently a pretty good one, at least that's what he tells me. And he wanted us to play. He got us into playing basketball at an early age. He would, take us to the local gymnasium, which was actually at the American Legion Hall when I was very young. And I believe Van Buren High School played their varsity games there until 1966, when the current gymnasium opened up at the high school. So he was always taking us out there, and then, we quickly fell in love with the sport. So growing up, we didn't have computers and probably had 4 channels on TV to choose from. So we were always outside playing sports, always.
How about Van Buren Athletics? Were you following them as a kid? What was the program like before you? I'm curious. I know the Madawaska history a little bit after the podcast we did there. I know the Fork End history. What's the Van Buren history like? Growing up for you?
Van Buren made some tournament appearances in the early 70s. I think 70 might have been the first year. 70, 71. I think you had Ryan Martin on the program. Ryan's dad, Ken, grew up on the same street as me and was on the first team, I believe, to go to Bangor in 70 or 71. I think they lost to Dexter or Skank or something like that. 75, Van Buren won its first tournament game. They beat Dexter in a quarterfinal, but then they lost to Dover Foxcroft with Kevin Nelson, the name you may know, 6'8", later went on to play University of Maine. Then they did not win another tournament game, although they made tournament appearances until my senior year when we were in. I'm sure we're going to get to that, but we won 2 games my senior year until when we lost in the final once again to Dexter. So we have a pretty rich history with Dexter. Unfortunately, not always on the right side.
So obviously nowadays it's a little bit different for kids. You know, they get into it probably a little bit younger in terms of working with trainers or how they get better and stuff like that. It's a different environment now than what you grew up in. Curious, you know, what fueled you? Like at a young age, like did you just want to play and playing made you better, or were you actually working on your game as a youngster, adding things to your game? Like what was it like for you?
Yeah, I think I probably approached basketball a little differently than most people at that time period, which might have given me an advantage. I find today basketball is a little more formalized, where you have AAU practices, and there's some benefit to that, but I also think there can be a downside, whereas kids are not working on their own in their backyards. I'm going to work on shooting, going to my right off the dribble for the next half hour. When they go to a practice, what they're going to do is going to be dictated by what the coach does, and that usually involves some form of structured offensive work and things like that. So when I was growing up, I remember going to the local court, hanging around my older brothers, and there'd be, 15 kids there, and they're dividing up teams, and I wouldn't get picked because I was too small, too young, and not good enough. And when they would leave, finally, then I would go work on my game. My goal was to eventually, I want to get chosen to be on one of those teams. And seeing my brothers play and kind of the attention that they got for being good at it, and how varsity players in our community, when they wore the varsity jacket in town, people looked up to them. So that was something that kind of attracted me. And I think basketball, of all the sports, is the one sport you can really get better by yourself. You can work on your dribbling, your shooting, without having anybody there. And as I got older, I was able to convince local neighborhood kids to rebound for me for candy or a quarter. Or that was the 70s, so yeah. Quarter went a lot further.
I'm curious, like, where did it come from for you in terms of wanting to get better? Because you played other sports as well growing up. I played soccer, played baseball. So what was it about basketball that you just wanted to put that work in? Like, what drove you to get hundreds of jump shots out of working your ball handling at a young age? Like, what fueled that?
Well, I went to basketball camps and got some ideas there. I went to Pine Tree basketball camp at a pretty early age. But I think, because I played baseball too, and I played soccer, and I did well in those sports, but I just found that basketball, I kind of surpassed my classmates at a much quicker rate. So I think that encouraged me to say, I might have a chance to do something with this sport, at a higher level. And I was big into goal setting early on. I can remember at a young age, following Van Buren varsity basketball, and a freshman had never been on the varsity team. So probably in 6th grade, I already told myself that's going to be a goal for me. So goal setting was important, and it was just fun. I just, to this day, I'm 53, and I love seeing the ball go through the hoop when it comes, off my fingers. It's like a little adrenaline shot.
It never gets old, right?
Oh, it can't get old. I don't jump as high though, that's for sure.
Yeah. So when it came time to get to high school, and I know some of the small schools you can play varsity at a younger age, like 8th grade and stuff like that. Van Buren was a little bit bigger back then. So did you have to wait till freshman year of high school to actually?
Yeah, we had. I'll go back a little bit. We had middle school. Back then, you had a 7th grade team and an 8th grade team. So I played 7th grade basketball for a coach named Norman Bouchard, and we had a successful team and did pretty well. And I excelled at that age. And then 8th grade, I had one of the most influential people, not just in my basketball life, but in my life in general, named John Parent, who was my 8th grade coach, went on to be the assistant coach when I played varsity. And we kind of came full circle that when I came back to coach the Van Buren boys from 93 to 98, he was my JV coach and assistant coach. And then when I took the Van Buren girls job in 2010, coaching my daughter, John Parent once again became my assistant coach. And I'll never forget. And of course, he also ran the intramural program at our elementary school. So I had a beginning with him there. But I'll never forget, one of the traditions that Coach John Parent had is at the end of your 8th grade year, he took us in the locker room after the last game, and he said what each player's goal should be, what he thought they could achieve in the future. And he told, like one kid, he might say, if you keep working hard, you can be on the varsity team by your junior year or your sophomore year. And when he told me, he said, your goal should be to start next year as a freshman. And that just made me want to work so hard because I didn't want to let John Parent down. He's like a second father to me. So when he told me that, I not only wanted to do it for myself, I didn't want to make his prediction wrong. So, yeah. Funny how it can motivate you, huh?
Absolutely. All kinds of things. And I'm sure there was all kinds of things later on that motivated you as well, which we'll get into. So coming in as a freshman, like what kind of program were you coming into? Where was Van Buren basketball at that point?
Yeah. So the year before, so it would have been my 8th grade year, my brother, Brian, was the leading scorer on the varsity team. They had gone to the Class B tournament. They went in ranked number 4 and lost to Hamden Academy. Lost quite a few players off that team. So interestingly, coming into my freshman year, the varsity team ended up being 9 seniors and me. And this senior class, those players had not really contributed much on the year before's team. So they kind of saw this as their one chance at glory. So that sometimes could make for a difficult situation when you have this incoming freshman. And, I didn't really know how successful I was going to be as a freshman. But as the year went on and it became pretty apparent that I was going to, probably be the best player on the team, sometimes that could be a difficult situation for seniors who have been waiting for their turn.
Well, what's like the scouting report on freshman Matt Rossignol, like size-wise? Where were you at? Were you a scrawny guy or what
Yeah,
was
very, very scrawny, 5'11". I would say quickness and leaping ability have always been a strength of mine. I could shoot very well. Interestingly, though, because I'd only worked on jump shooting, I was not a good foul shooter my freshman year because a foul shot is a set shot. And my father had always taught me to jump as high as you can and release your shot at the peak of your jump. So I had not spent enough time on foul shooting. And then I eventually became a very good foul shooter, but that freshman year I wasn't. So I know I averaged 21 points a game my freshman year. We missed the tournament by, I think, percentage points. Back then it was the 50% rule, not the 2/3 rule. So I think we finished in 9th place, got edged out by Herman or something. So I think we only played 15 games, our schedule that year, which is weird, but
it is a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we beat Fort Kent twice.
Oh, great. Thanks for bringing that up. I
got to get Tommy P back because we were 19-1 in my 4 years against Madawaska, Fort Kent, and Wisdom. We played Wisdom my last 2 years. I lost one game, and that was to Madawaska home my freshman year. All 5 starters fouled out.
So that's something I wanted to ask about because, when you were coming through, you guys were Class B. So obviously the towns were probably a little bit more similar in size in terms of population. And nowadays it's kind of like, Van Buren is the smaller school. Madawaska is a smaller school. Fort Kent's the bigger school. Fort Kent's Class C now. But back then when you guys were all like similar population and similar size schools, like, did you feel them looking down on you or did Van Buren approach like Fort Kent as the team to beat in the Valley type thing? Like, what was the mindset back then?
I think Van Buren people have kind of always felt like of the Valley towns, you look at socioeconomics and things of that nature, that sometimes we're the second sister or the third sister, so to speak. So there was always that to some degree. But Van Buren teams have always been really successful, even when they, were Class B. They've won state championships in soccer. The girls in '77 won the Class B state championship for basketball, the only gold ball we have for basketball. But, our town has 7 state championships in soccer. But yeah, I think the competition was always there. To be honest with you, for basketball, there wasn't really a rivalry with Fort Kent and Madawaska because during my 4 years, they were not really competitive with us. The games, for the most part, were not close. Right. It was more Holton. We played Holton, Caribou. We played Presque Isle. Fort Fairfield was pretty good. And, of course, the base was going strong at Limestone, so they had some good teams too. But never lost to Fort Kent. 9-0. We played them in a Christmas tournament one time. Kevin Chassis, Robert Plord, you probably know.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the softball podcast there. But, yeah, never lost to Fort Kent. 7-1 against Madawaska, never lost to Wisdom. So I wouldn't consider them rivalries in basketball. Soccer was different, though.
Different story, yeah. So obviously, as you got better, is the scoring exploits start coming out. When did you start feeling the attention of whether it's other teams maybe coming at you a little bit harder, individual opponents maybe guarding you a little bit rougher because they know that this is their chance to maybe make a name or something like that? Like, when did you start getting that type of pressure or that feeling from other teams?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it kind of happened early. My very first game my freshman year was at Fort Fairfield. Never forget it. I scored 10 points. It was not bad. Started as a freshman. For a freshman, not a bad game. Second game was against Holton, had 14 points. Then we went to Madawaska, and I had 35. And all of a sudden, it's like, ooh, okay, who's this 9th grader?
Yeah.
And then even some of the seniors on my team were kind of like, unsure about if they want a freshman to be the leading scorer when it's supposed to be their turn, So then immediately, that started to happen. And unfortunately, being immature at 13, 14 years old, I didn't always respond with my attitude. And I'll never forget, even that game that had 35, and my varsity coach was Bob Hebert, who I really need to talk a lot about, and we will as we go forward here. But I had shown some attitude during that game. And I remember, and it was our first win of the season too. So feeling pretty good, about playing well individually and our team winning our first game. But I had shown some attitude because Madawaska was trying to be physical with me and the referees weren't always calling it. And I showed my displeasure, which of course, as a coach now, I would never allow my players to do some of the things I was doing. So we're on the bus on the ride home, and my coach, Bob Hebert, calls me up to the front of the bus. And he says, so what do you think, people who saw the game tonight, what do you think they're saying about you? And I said, well, they must be saying pretty positive things about me. I had 35 points. I'm a freshman. He said, no, they're probably talking about your attitude. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. He says, let your play be what people remember, not your attitude or lack of a good attitude. And 180-degree turn after that. And it was one of those epiphanies, a moment where an adult coach like Bob Hebert needed to teach me what it means to be classy while you're playing on the court. So never forgotten that.
You mentioned being happy with the 35 points as a freshman, and I think anyone would. That's a lot of points, especially as a freshman. So, and you said you're very goal oriented. So obviously the individual awards or individual goals, that probably came a lot easier than maybe team goals. How'd you go about assessing those goals, like during your 4 years in high school? Like, was it, I want to win a state championship, I'm going to do whatever it takes for us to win? Or was it, we're just going to get better every year? Like, how did you go about assessing those goals?
Yeah, I actually used to print out team goals and individual goals. I would type them up and I put them in my locker, taped them there. So every time I opened my locker at school to go with my books, I saw it and I was reminded of it. And it's something that I've always tried to do. And winning a state championship, I had a picture of a gold ball that I would keep in my wallet. So because that was the ultimate goal, to win a state championship. Unfortunately, we lost in the regional final. We used to call it Eastern Maine final. Now it's called Northern Maine final.
Right.
We were 20-0 my senior year. Of course, I'm sure we're gonna get to that as we break down each year. But very goal oriented. Individual goals were always not so much statistically, but I remember wanting to be the best player on my street in town, then being the best player in my town. Then I want to be the best player in the St. John Valley. I want to be the best player in Aroostook County, and keep taking it. Wanted to make all state teams and things of that nature. So I think it's okay to have individual goals as long as they don't get in the way of the team goals. But I always thought the better I can become individually, the better chance we're going to have of achieving those team goals. And I was blessed to have unbelievable classmates. And after my freshman year, teammates who there was no jealousy. They were very, very supportive of me kind of starting to stand out from the rest of them. And I can't, underestimate or talk enough about that my classmates and teammates, there was no jealousy, and they supported me trying to excel.
So what was the biggest difference after that freshman year to your sophomore year? You mentioned all those upperclassmen that were there that first year. Like, how did the dynamics of the team change moving forward? Being surrounded around probably, kids your age, kids you came up with. Like, how did that change for you after freshman year?
Yeah, a couple things changed. One, physically. My freshman year, I was 5'10", 5'11", maybe 135 pounds. And then my sophomore year, I was like 6'1", which is kind of the height I am now. Although as I'm getting older, I think I might be shrinking. Gained a little bit of weight, probably got up to 150. But my jumping ability really increased. I did a lot of work, box jumping, plyometrics, things that I think at that time not many people were doing. I have as you know, my brother Mark is a physical therapist and knows a lot about how to get the most physically out of your body. I mean, no matter how quick or slow you are, you can get quicker. So I did a lot of explosion drills for lateral explosion and leaping ability. So my freshman year, I could dunk a volleyball on good days. And then my sophomore year, I could dunk a basketball. So it took off from there. So those would be the big things. I think I've always said, to be a great player, there are three parts. There's being athletic, there's being skilled, and there's being smart, understanding the game. I think my freshman year I was very skilled, but physically I was, probably a little bit behind most of the kids I was playing against who were seniors and 17, 18 years old. My sophomore year, I not only closed that gap, I think I became, for the most part, most people I played, I was quicker and I could jump over them. So that would be the big difference going from my freshman to my sophomore year. I'm not an expert on adolescence, but I know certain people, they physically, peak at different times, but there was a big jump between my freshman and sophomore year of the 4 years. I would say that was the biggest jump.
You mentioned how just being a competitor, you wanted to be the best player on your street, best player in your town, best player in the county, best player in the valley. Who were some of those guys you were chasing? Did you have like individual players that you kind of had marked, like, all right, like if I meet this guy, I'm gonna give him work? Or did you have targets that you had?
Yeah, I remember it because, and you'll be aware of this, Fort Kent, they didn't play in the Aroostook League. They had their own in-town thing where they just play. Am I correct with that?
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every now and then, Legs Labby, I'm sure you know who I love Legs Labby more than anything. He's a great man and has always, done very well for me as far as giving me, when he used to run the sports section in St. John Valley. And I remember him writing an article about the Fort Kent League and Kevin Chassis, okay, who was kind of like the name in Fort Kent. And even though Kevin was 2 years older than me, so that was a name for the Valley that I always looked at. Of course, in Caribou had a guy named Tony Misha who ended up making the Bangor Daily News All-State team 2 years. He was a year older than me. So he was someone that I, kind of kept an eye on how he's doing relative to me. But, you used to always play these games in your backyard, and I would pretend I'm playing against Fort Kent. And, you got names like Labby, the Pelletier, the Chassis. So you always envisioned yourself playing against those guys and, using your imagination and hitting game-winning shots with a Chassis or a Pelletier in your face and things like that.
So you mentioned some of the schools you guys played to outside the Valley. So not only did you probably look forward to looking or matching up against certain players, I'm guessing you look forward to going to certain schools, like some of the bigger schools. So you mentioned Caribou and Holton. What was it like? Because, I mean, obviously people knew who you were. And when you came to town, that was probably one of the bigger games on the schedule. So, like, what were some of these games like when you went to Caribou, when you went to Holton?
Yeah, well, I think, and you can probably relate, Tom, having played for Fort Kent and having played on really good teams, by the way, and a really good player in your own right. I've always felt that Prescal and Caribou kind of look at the Valley as a while ago when I mentioned Van Buren being the second sister. I didn't feel that they respected us. We were smaller communities, and they were the Class A schools. So I always looked at that as okay. And not to lie, we're French up here, so I sometimes thought there was a little bit of I don't want to say discrimination or a little bit of prejudice or bias against us little Frenchies up here in the Valley. But I took that personally and wanted to show them, you want to laugh at us French people in the Valley? We're going to go put a hurting on you and see if you're still laughing when we're done, So, yeah, going to Prescal, Holton, and Caribou were the games you look forward to. There's no question. I know it was the same for you at Fort Kent.
Yeah. I'm curious, too, like, what were the environments like? Were there some hostile crowds? I mean, you see some student sections at some of the bigger schools now, but what was it like going into a packed Caribou gym or like a packed Holton gym?
Yeah, we always, like I said, after my freshman year, my sophomore year to my senior year, we always played in front of sellout crowds. And their animus was usually directed mostly towards me. And sometimes they'd have signs, and I remember going into one place and the hoop that the cheerleaders would make that the team would run through for the other team. One time it said Matt Who on it with a big question. I think I had 51 that game, so I think they knew who I was after. I remember in Madawaska, there had been an article in the early 80s about the economic status of different communities in Maine, and Van Buren was rated one of, if not the poorest per capita income community in the state of Maine. So they started calling Van Buren Cheesetown because you get free cheese if your community reaches a certain level or whatever. So I remember being in layup drills in Madawaska and getting hit by pieces of cheese that the Madawaska fans would throw. I still bug my Madawaska friends about that. And they say, remember when we threw cheese at you? I says, yeah, I remember when we beat you by 35. But yeah, so the crowds were great. It's hard to not bring your best when you're going to a Caribou or a Holton. And of course, Holton's gym was unique because they had the seating behind each basket as well as on the side. So, and when we played there, it was like a stadium effect, and it was just awesome. I really loved it. It was great.
What'd you get better at between your freshman and sophomore year? I'm guessing the points per game probably went up. He's 22 as a freshman. Sophomore,
yeah, big jump. My sophomore year, I averaged 30 a game.
Was it free throws? Did you work on your free throws? Is that
yeah, I went from I remember in Holton, my freshman year, I went 0 for 6 from the foul line. I said, that ain't going to happen. First of all, if you can make foul shots, you're going to score more points, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up becoming a really good foul shooter. I think when I was at UMAINE, I had a manager who told me, he says, I always wondered if you tried to make as many in a row as you could, how you would do. He says, do you want to try it? And I said, sure. So I made 198 in a row.
It's not bad.
At the end, the backboard was like moving because I was staring at the same target for so long. I was really angry. I didn't make 2 more to get to 200, But yeah, foul shooting became a lot better, got stronger. I think what I got better at as time went on, believe it or not, was learning how to make my teammates better. I led my team in assists all 4 years that I played. So the ball was in my hands a lot. And that's a credit to my coach and my teammates' willingness to accept that was going to be the way our team was going to be run. So
yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue because I wanted to get into that next. I'm guessing you saw every possible junk defense, every possible attempt to try to slow you down. Like, how did you get better at that? Like, obviously double teams probably start coming and you have to adjust to that. Like, what did you do to get better at that? Was it just a matter of time and seeing it enough times, or?
Well, once again, being quicker and able to jump over people to shoot, that helped. But my coaches also did things, set screens for me, on the ball screens, ran me off staggered screens. But probably the biggest thing is I had really good teammates that I played with a kid named Steve Joven, who was a year older than me, 6'3" center, left-handed. He averaged 22 points a game. So I remember one game where a team almost literally had two guys, not a box and one, it was a triangle and two, with two on me, no matter if I had the ball or not. And Steve had 23 points in the first half, and we were up 15. So the other team would have to get out of that, and then I would get mine. I also played with a kid who was a year younger than me named Alan Medore. Alan ended up making third-team Bangor Daily News All-State in 1986. He was 6'4". He had 54 points in a prelim game against Fort Fairfield. That's a true story.
Yeah.
So junk defenses only work if the other players aren't any good. And kind of like with my daughter, when my daughter played, she had, Felicia Bouchard, Courtney Parent, other players who could knock down shots. And that's where those junk defenses won't work. So, yes, I was able to still kind of use my individual ability to beat these junk defenses. But more than anything, having really good teammates kind of forced the other team to get out of that.
So what was it like success-wise as a team? Like, did you guys gradually get better every year, or were you guys pretty much just, top of the class?
Actually, exactly the way you said it. My freshman year, we were 8-7. My sophomore year, we were 11-5. My junior year, we were 15-2. And then my senior year, we were 18-0. So my sophomore year, we ended up going, like I said, 11-5. It's weird how we played 17 games for 2 years in a row. But anyway, and our only two losses were to I'm going to my junior. So my sophomore year, we lost to Presque Isle, lost to Caribou, lost to Holton once. I don't remember who our other losses were too, but we ended up going number 8, and we had to play a prelim against Fort Fairfield at home. And it's a team we had beaten twice, pretty easily both times. And in this particular game, the game was tied going into the fourth quarter. We ended up winning by 12 or 13. And the Joven kid that I told you about, he had like 28 points. I had 30 points. And we went to Bangor as the 8 seed. We ended up matching up against Hamden Academy, who was Class B then. They were the 1 seed. And it was a 3-point game at halftime, 6-point game going to the fourth quarter. And they ended up beating us, but very respectful. And they had a kid named Paul Hagan, who was first team Bangor Daily News. I think he walked on at Texas A&M. And made the team, became a doctor. Anyway, I became good friends with his brother, Dave. But anyway, so yeah, I think I had 35. Our book had me for 35. The Bangor Daily had me for 33 in that game. So that was kind of a coming out party for people to hear about me or see me down in Bangor. And I know Tommy Pelletier experienced the same thing when he went to Bangor and really had a good game. You kind of get your name on the map if you play well down in Bangor. So that kind of happened to me in my tournament game my sophomore year, even though we lost. And typically a 1-8 game is not close.
Yeah.
And we made it very close. So
I think we all dream about playing in the Bangor Auditorium. Was it the case for you? Like, were you aware of what the auditorium was all about, or?
Yeah, well, I'd seen my brothers play there. My oldest brother, Mark, played there as a junior and senior. And his senior year, he played with my other brother, Brian, because they're only a year apart. And then Brian's senior year, they had gone. So I had seen my brothers play 3 games there. Of course, they never won. And my dad also took me to previous times. And I was just totally infatuated with the atmosphere and how people looked at players who did really well. And I remember leaving the auditorium after a game, going to the car, and I told my dad, I'm going to come back here someday and make a name for myself. And I think that kind of worked out.
What did you remember most about your first game on the auditorium floor? I mean, I feel like if you look at pictures from games back there, I feel like it looks a lot more packed than what it was later on. Like, I'm sure Bangor traveled well too.
Oh yeah, we did. And Hamden being right there down the road, literally from the Bangor Auditorium, was a packed house. And one of the strange things I remember is that both halves, it felt like when we came out for the second half, I felt like we were shooting at the same basket. I don't know why that was, but it was like I couldn't get my bearings straight. But every time you scored, it was just loud, and it was really awesome. And being competitive in the game, we were worried, we're number 8 seed. How are we going to do against this team? And not many people had given us a chance. And me personally, a lot of people had made it, Rossignol versus Hagan. How was I going to do in the individual matchup with him? So, and I was looking forward to seeing how I could match up with him. It worked out pretty good. His team won though, but outscored him 33-25 or something. So it was fun.
We talked about how you got better as a youngster, just getting all kinds of jump shots up, working on ball handling. How'd you attack it in high school? Like, how did you know what to work on? How did it change? What was your approach to actually adding things to your game every year?
Yeah, well, first of all, being able to go both directions, left or right, that was something that I realized early on was going to be important. Having the ability to take a jump shot, which I think is kind of a lost art, to be honest with you, and not having a three-point line. I know a lot of my supporters always say, boy, I wonder how many points you'd have had with a three-point line. But sometimes I say, I think not having a three-point line might have helped me in a lot of regards. My dad always taught me that when you play in a game, he says, one of your goals has to be to attempt 10 foul shots. You need to get to the line and take 10 free throws per game if you want to be a great player. And he says, and you're not going to do that just taking perimeter shots. So I scored a lot of points, believe it or not, 15 feet and in, the mid-range. I used to love to attack the basket, get to the elbows, and do that. So that's a drill. I call it elbow drills, and I still make my players do it, that I've long believed in. And you think of offenses like the flex offense. The elbow is an important area in the flex offense and in any offense. So I score a lot of points going to the free throw line, and by attacking the basket. And if I'd had a three-point line, I know I'd have made some, but who knows how it would have affected the rest of my game. So that was something that I always thought, get to the free throw line.
So obviously the points kept coming junior and senior year. You mentioned getting out of Bangor, and that kind of got your name out to the rest of the state. Kids nowadays, they have the advantage of what we talked about earlier, AAU ball, to kind of get exposure and stuff like that. At all in high school, like outside of the actual high school basketball season, like were you playing anywhere else? Like were you able to go downstate and play against different players? What was that like?
Well, I did basketball camps. I went to Pine Tree Camp my sophomore year. I went to a camp in Boston run by Dave Cowens, a name you may know.
Boston Celtic.
Yeah, the 6'9" center for the Celtics. So
yep.
The funny story is that the reason I went to that camp is I have an aunt who lives in Lynn, Massachusetts, my dad's sister, Virginia Lucia, and she's a nutritionist, and she was Dave Cowan's personal nutritionist.
Oh, wow, I got the hookup right there.
Kind of weird, huh? So she was able to get me like a scholarship to go to his camp. And I'm sure he was thinking, yeah, we'll let him come to, who's this, local coming from northern Maine to my camp in Boston. Yeah, I'll give him a scholarship. So I went to the camp, and I got the MVP of the camp. So I don't know if that was a little nepotism because he wanted to, take care of his nutritionist nephew. So going to camps, and then I went to the Pine Tree Camp in Waterville, as I mentioned. I went to a Gold Star camp, which used to be held on the campus of SMCC in South Portland. It was run by the guy who used to coach the St. Joe's team, and Rick Simons. I think he announces the Red Claws games now. So I went to that camp, but the best camp I ever went to was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called the 5-Star Basketball Camp, run by Howard Garfinkel.
Yes. How'd you get hooked up with that? Because isn't that an invite thing right there?
Yeah, you had to get Skip Chappelle, who ended up becoming my college coach for 3 years at Maine. He suggested that I go to that camp, and back then you needed a letter of recommendation from a Division I coach to attend it. So I was able to go, and one door down from me in the dorm was this scrawny kid from Arizona, 6'4". So we hung out all week. We played one-on-one all week, wrote letters to each other. Hey, we're going to go back to the same week, next year. And I still have those letters. The next year he came back. He was 6'8". The games of one-on-one were done. His name was Sean Elliott.
Okay. Yeah.
So I developed a pretty good relationship with him. In fact, when he won a title, I still had his phone number. I called him. He talked to my kids on the phone. So, that's one of the wonderful things about basketball and being a lifelong basketball person is you just get to meet so many people and so many connections that are really neat. So 5-Star Camp was unbelievable. I mean, you had every Division I top 20 coach watching your games.
And it was a little bit different back then. Wasn't that like an outdoor camp? Like, wasn't it most of it?
It was completely outdoor. So if it was windy and you're a guard and you're not, a while ago I talked about attacking the basket. You're not going to attack the basket too much at that level. You're looking at, 6'10", 7-footers, 6'8" forwards. And, what you'd see at the big time top 20 Division I programs, your Kentuckys, your Dukes, your Carolinas. That was the level of play. So it was an eye-opener for me going into my junior year. Okay, I thought I was something. I got a ways to go. But that was one of the things, the measuring stick. So I realized when I came home, physically, you got to improve physically.
What did it do confidence-wise, though? I'm guessing coming back, like, you're going up against, like you said, some of the best players in the country, then to come back to Maine. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
your
learned.
confidence
I
had to
learned
be a
that
little bit
I can't.
higher.
You're not gonna shoot over people.
Yeah.
You know, like I was doing at high school. You're gonna have to learn to have a quicker release, and that's something that I developed because of going to that camp. And when I ended up playing at Maine, it really helped me a lot. That some of the bigger games that we had and I had success. It was all about creating space. How can I create that space? It doesn't need to be a lot of space, and that's where the dribble can do that for you. I love the inside out dribble, the crossover dribble, but just basically trying to create space. And I try to teach my players that now. You don't need a lot of space, but you have to practice doing it that way. If you're not practicing game speed, and that is something that I always did when I worked on my game.
You mentioned going to that camp and it kind of being a measuring stick, and I'm guessing for everyone else back here, you became the measuring stick for them. So I'm curious, if people were chasing you, like what were you chasing? Like what drove you? Was it just team success at that point, junior, senior year, like just state championship? That's what you were concerned about?
Well, definitely I was thinking about that, but I was thinking beyond. I wanted to play Division I. By this point, you're getting kind of form letters, not serious, but I'm getting form letters because I went to 5-star from every top program in the country, but they're form letters. It's not like we want you. BC, Boston College, and Villanova was probably a little more serious, especially BC. But then when I heard Dana Barrows was going there, who's kind of a clone to me as far as style of player, I'm certainly not saying I'm as good as Dana Barrows. He had a 10 or 15-year career in the NBA. Although when we played each other head-to-head, I did fine against him. But realistically, BC, I could have gone probably as a preferred walk-on, but I wanted to play. So Maine quickly became the place that I knew I was probably going to end up playing if they were to offer me. I had an offer from St. Enslam in, I want to say Manchester, New Hampshire, but don't quote me on that. But that was Division II, and it's good Division II, don't get me wrong. And I think nowadays the gap between Division II and Division I probably isn't as vast as it used to be. Same thing with Division III. Division III basketball, pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, really good. But I think the further you go back in time, the gap between those three levels was greater than it is now. So I wanted to play Division I, and the more I said that, sometimes the more people criticized, hey, you're from the valley, you're not big enough, you're not tall enough. So that just motivated me to want to do that.
I'm curious as to what the environment was like at some of these home games in Van Buren, your later years in high school. I'm guessing it was the toughest ticket in town to get into, right?
Yeah, if you weren't there for the start of the JV game, you weren't going to get in, and that's just the truth. In fact, after my sophomore year, they put bleachers on the stage. You're familiar with the Van Buren gym, so they put like 6 or 7 rows of bleachers on the stage. Those were for like the season ticket holders. And they also had chairs on the floor around the gym. So I remember the game I scored my 2000th point. There were chairs all around the gym. So yeah, you needed to get there early. Van Buren fans are, I'm sure kind of notorious for not maybe being the most sportsmanlike, but they sure supported us. And there's nothing like, and there's nothing like a home basketball game with a packed crowd in the middle of these brutal winters that we have. Trying to make your family proud and your community proud was always something that meant a lot to me.
So you mentioned your senior year, you guys went 18-0. What was your actual tournament success like? How deep did you guys actually get?
Yeah, well, I'll back up a little bit. So my junior year, which is the best team I think I played on, we were 15-2. Like I said, we had Steve Joven, our center, Alamador, 6'4". He was a forward on our team. Richard Ezzy, myself, Glenn Martin, Jeff Sear. Anyway, we went in ranked number one in Class B, and we were going to be playing Mount Desert Island on a Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, the primetime slot. We had a practice on Sunday, and the practice was going to be our last practice. The next day is Monday. We're on the bus. We're going to Bangor to get in our hotels and get ready for our game Tuesday. Well, at the end of practice, Glenn Martin, who's a year older than me, he asked me if I wanted to play a little one-on-one. You know how the coach lets you stick around and shoot around. So I said, sure. So I took a jump shot, landed on his foot, almost broke my ankle.
Oof.
Yeah, so I would not have been able to play if our game would have been in 2 weeks, never mind 2 days. So I don't play. I can't play in the tournament. I was in a cast. And we were the number one seed, and it was just devastating. After my sophomore year, how I thought we're competitive with the number one team, Hamden. My junior year, I honestly thought we were going to win the tournament. And, not that they couldn't have won it without me, but certainly, you lose 30 points and 8 assists or whatever. And now the other team's probably going to press us, which is something we never saw. And we ended up losing by 10 points, 65-55. And it was weird that year, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds all lost to 5, 6, 7, 8.
Oh, wow.
So So it kind of would have been teed up for us, I think, had I been able to play. That's one of those questions that, God willing, if I'm able to make it to heaven someday, I'm going to ask, did Oswald act alone in killing Kennedy? And would we have won it if I had not hurt my ankle? So that was devastating. And I really felt bad for Steve Joven, who it was his last chance, and he had 30 points and 22 rebounds that game without me. And at the end, he was breaking press that MDI threw at us. So that was really disappointing. And the ankle bothered me for a little while after that. Yeah.
And senior year, 18-0?
Yeah. Senior year, losing Steve was big. Not going to replace that. But Mador really started to come into his own and became an 18-point, 15 rebound guy. Richard Ezzy was the type of player who now manages my brother's businesses, by the way, for County Physical Therapy. Second shout out for CPT. Go there for all your physical therapy needs. He came along, improved a lot. Armin Fort, another guy to take charges. Marcel Schaub, who was a goalie in soccer, a catcher in baseball. So you know what type of guy those guys are. He's in basketball. He's taking charges. He's setting screens. Went 18-0, beat Caribou at home. We were 17-0. Our last game is against Caribou at home. Van Buren had never beaten Caribou. And their coach, the late, great Jerry Duffy, allegedly was quoted as saying, the day that I lose to Van Buren is the day I retire. Van Buren fans got a hold of that. Happy retirement Jerry signs were all over the gym. And he called 3 timeouts in the first quarter. We beat him by 23.
There you go.
To close out the undefeated season. So that was pretty special. And we had dedicated our season to our head coach, Bob Hebert's dad, who was suffering from Alzheimer's and was, in the final days of his life. And we wanted to do that for our coach. So to go undefeated, that added a little special, flavor to doing that. Yeah.
And then how about the actual tournament?
Okay, so then we go to the tournament. And weird, we're 18-0, but we're not ranked 1. We're ranked 2. The year before we were 15-2 and we were ranked 1. This year we're 18-0. You know how heel points can be.
Yeah.
We're ranked 2nd, so we're going to play a 7 seed, but 7 has to play 10 in a prelim, and it's MDI and MCI in that prelim. And we're praying for MDI, the 7 seed, to win because we wanted to get them back.
Yeah.
And they did win. And so we play MDI and actually don't play well. You know how they say you got to survive one bad game in Bangor. And it was the quarterfinal. We were up by 1 with 38 seconds left, and they had the ball. So we were deathly afraid that they were going to hold for 1 and beat us at a buzzer shot. But Almador got a steal on an entry pass. I dribbled around. They fouled me. I hit both ends of a 1-on-1. They come down. Richard Ezzy takes a charge. They foul me. I make both ends. We win by 5. So it was like, you got it. And that was our first experience of winning a game in Bangor.
Right.
And that's something that's, you talk to anybody who's ever experienced. I remember Miles Morneau, who was a soccer player for me at Madawaska, who played in state championship in soccer. And he told me, he says, Coach, winning a quarterfinal in Bangor felt better than winning an Eastern Maine championship in soccer. And that's what he told me. I'm biased towards basketball, but it was pretty special. So then we're going to be playing the winner of Dover Foxcroft and Skank High School. Skank, of course, is out of East Millinocket. And for Dover Foxcroft, playing for them is a young man named Dean Smith, who ended up being probably my best friend in college. He was in my wedding. I was in his wedding, and we were teammates at UMAINE. So he's playing for Dover Foxcroft. And we'd gone to Super Week, which was a camp that Chappelle ran at UMAINE. That was an invite, too. And we got to know each other a little bit then. I think the final free throw contest came down to he and I. So we became a little bit friendly. And I know you mentioned Mark Graham in Fort Kent, and Mark Graham played on that Skank team. And this is a funny Mark Graham story. Mark's an interesting cat. But anyway, so we win our quarterfinal game on Tuesday, and the semifinal is only going to be like 3 or 4 days later. So we come back home. One day it's snowing really hard before our game. There's a knock at the door. I answer the door. It's Mark Graham. He's driven up with his aunt to Van Buren. He comes. He says, "Hi, Matt. I'm Mark Graham. I play for Skank. You want to go play 1-on-1?"
Wow.
I'm like, what are you talking about? No, I'm not playing 1-on-1 and hurt my ankle, again, and miss a tournament game. But we hung out all day, it was kind of cool. And we ended up playing them in the semifinal. It was the afternoon session, 3:30. I do remember that. And still to this day, it's a Class B record for team points in a Class B game. We scored 97 points, and we beat them 97-85. Mark had a good game, but he fouled out. And I ended up with 51 points that game, which was a record for a long time until Corey DeWitt from Ellsworth beat it in a double overtime game. Of course, he had a 3-point line. I did.
Yeah.
So I had 17. I remember I think it's 17 field goals and 17 free throws or something. Does that add up? Yeah, 34 plus 17. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. So that puts us in the Eastern Maine final. A dream that Van Buren boys team had never played in a regional final. And who we're playing? Dexter. Dexter was the 1 seed. They'd only lost 1 game. The late, great Ed Gursky was their coach. Very fundamentally sound. Bunch of football players, the Haynes twins. The coach's son, John Gursky, Gary Williams, just Steve Bell, who I think is now the principal at Dexter. Number one, quality people. Got to know a lot of them after. All business on the court. They were into weightlifting because of football, so that made a big difference in the game. We didn't play well. I know a lot of the shots that I got any shot I wanted, just they weren't falling as well as I had the game before. Maybe a little fatigue from how hard I had worked. Close, a 5 to 8 point game the whole way. At the end, we had to foul. It got away from us a little bit, and we lost. I think it ended up being 15 points, but it was a 5 to 6 point game the whole way. And I ended up with 24 in that game. So it was a disappointing end to my career, but knowing that my career is really not done, that I'm going to be going to play at Maine, kind of lessened the sting a little bit. But it was heartbreaking to know that I'm not going to wear the blue and gold anymore. And, when you play for Maine, you're playing for a lot of people. When you're playing for your hometown, it's a lot different.
Special. Looking back at it, which one of those tournament losses hurts more? Your last game as a senior, or the one that you didn't get a chance to play in your junior year when you feel like you could have won states?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Not being able to play, you talk about regrets, never having regrets, not knowing what if. That's frustrating, not knowing. And I do believe that was the best of my high school teams my junior year because of having Steve Joven on the team. I firmly believe we would have won that tournament, but it wasn't in the cards. Dexter deserved to beat us that night in the regional final. I do believe if we'd have played them 10 times, we probably beat them 7. But when it mattered, they beat us. They deserved to.
So you mentioned that your career wasn't done. You got to go play at UMAINE, but your last high school game, at the time, were you the all-time leading scorer in the state at that point? I mean, we kind of brushed over the fact when you said you got 2,000 points earlier. That's no small achievement right there. At the time, did you graduate as the all-time leading scorer?
Well, most people thought I was. I ended up at 2,257 points, but there was another player from Oak Grove, Coburn named Derek Counts, who apparently played 1 year in New York and then his last 3 or 4 years. And once again, how those small Class D schools, you can play more than 4 years. Apparently he had 2,281. So I don't think I was the leading scorer because of Derek, who I ended up playing against. He went to UNH. Great guy, 5'10", very athletic, had a good career at UNH, 1,000-point scorer at UNH, so the real deal.
It must be nice to just be able to drop steadily. I had 51 at the auditorium, or I dropped 50 that night. Looking back on it, do you have one game that sticks out the most, just being in the zone, or just
Yeah, well, there's a lot of games. Funny story. This one's Fort Kent story. My career scoring average is the most against Fort Kent, by the way. In my career, I think I averaged 34.9 against Fort Kent. But my sophomore year, we played Fort Kevin Chassis, who's a chiropractor in, I want to say, Dover Foxcroft, as a matter of fact. We played Fort Kent in a Christmas tournament, which, I always thought that was weird. Right? If we're going to have a Christmas tournament, why are we inviting teams that we play on the regular season?
Right.
We played Fort Kent in a Christmas tournament, and we were behind most of the game. That was my sophomore year. And I ended up scoring 44 points in that game. We came back and we won. And when we were shaking hands after Kevin, when he got to me, he kind of jokingly said, "That's the last time you get 40 on me." And I was like, whatever. A week later, we have to play them for real in the regular season. Christmas vacation's over, and we play them at home. And we beat him by 19, and he was right. I didn't get 40. I got 50. That was my first 50-point game in my career. So when we shook hands, he says, "Kev, you're right. I didn't get 40. Yeah, so that's one that sticks out. Probably Tommy Pelletier, my junior year at Fort Kent. Legs Labby wanted a picture with me and Tommy before the game, the 2 leading scorers in Valley history. And Tommy was, and I got a good Tommy story for you later, or maybe I'll tell it now since we're there. But he took a picture of us, and Tommy wished me luck, and he said, "Hey, keep it under 50 tonight." And he laughed and winked, and I did the same, and I ended up at 48. Jinxed me, But since we're talking about Tommy, who, by the way, I just think the world of, my freshman year, I'm in my dorm. this is like in September, probably my first or second week of college, and I get a phone call. Someone says, you got a phone call. You know how in colleges you got to go in the dorm in that little closet. So it's Tommy Pelletier. He says, hey, Matt, it's Tommy. What are you up to? I said, I just got done practice, you know. He says, I want to take you out for supper. I said, all right. He says, I live in Oak Hall, blah, blah, blah. And he picks me up. He takes me out for a nice meal. And he says, the reason why I'm taking you out to dinner is just to, you know, to give you a pep talk about how to be a good young man, respectful, and don't waste the opportunity you're going to have in college. And make the Valley proud. And I've never forgotten, he didn't have to do that, but that shows you the type of man that Tommy Pelletier is, and I've never forgotten that.
Just curious, was there like any type of rivalry there, or was he just one of those guys where, you know, you wanted to do better than what he did? Or, you know, what's that relationship like?
Well, I was compared to him at an early age, you know, when you start making a name and scoring points, and it's like, oh man, you know, you're kind of like Tommy Pelletier used to be for Fort Kent. You know, he was, you know, not overly big, 5'10", whatever. I assume our playing styles were similar. I'm a little bit bigger, perhaps, you know, at 6'1", but Tommy was just an unbelievable athlete. I mean, great soccer player, unbelievable baseball player, captain of Brown soccer team that went to a Final Four in Division I. Are you kidding me? I know Chappelle told me that he had offered Tommy to play at Maine. So he was someone that I always looked up to, and not going to lie. I mean, one of my goals was to try to surpass him, and whether or not I did is not important. But he was somebody that you looked up to and wanted to emulate, certainly.
Absolutely. So we just talked about all the points scored in high school, and then you kind of get to UMAINE and it's like starting over. So curious, what adjustment was that like? You know, how big of an adjustment was it from senior year of high school to freshman year of college? You know, what was the transition like? I'm just curious.
It was huge. And one of the problems, I think, being in the Valley and in Aroostook County is you're not playing against the upper echelon competition. You can only get better the more you play against that level. Right. And being up here, it was kind of hard for me to, you know, it was too easy for me to play. And that's not good. You want to be challenged because that's how you keep going up. So I would sometimes fall into bad habits of doing things that I could get away with up here, but you're never going to get away with at the next level. So that was a big adjustment. The physicality, you know, faster, quicker, stronger, all of that. Although I would say right away I was the most skilled player on the team as a freshman, but the physical part of it was something that needed to be fixed. I was not really into weightlifting, so I had to get into that. Which was a big adjustment. And coming in as a freshman, you know, when you have two returning guards that were starters last year, you know, and not starting. I didn't start the first 6 games my freshman year. So that was something that was just totally foreign to me. And I'm not going to lie, I struggled with it mentally. You know, I didn't want to accept that. Then after the 5th game, I became a starter and stayed in the lineup for the rest of my 4 years as a starter. But my first game I ever played was at Michigan State. Scott Skiles, starting point guard for Michigan State, first team All-American, and I'm sitting on the bench, and our 2 guard picks up 2 fouls right away. His name was TJ Forrester, 6'3" player from Toronto, and my coach taps me and he says, go in for him. This is 4 minutes into the game. I'm in Jennison Fieldhouse. Magic Johnson's jersey's hanging. You know, 1979 NCAA champs. That's right there. And, you know, the place is 20,000 people, and I'm going in and I'm picking up Scott Skiles, and I put my hand on his hip, you know, to hand check him, and he whacks my arm. I felt like he broke my arm, and he's, get your hand off me, boy. I was like, okay, it's a little different here. Yeah. You know? And that team ended up going to the Sweet 16 and lost to Kansas and Danny Manning. And it was kind of controversial where the clock was held. Michigan State had a lead late. So, you know, they had 3 players on that team that ended up getting drafted in the NBA. Vernon Carr out of Detroit, and Darryl Johnson, and, of course, Scott Skiles. Who I believe Skiles still has the record for most assists in an NBA game with 30. So,
30, yeah. Yeah,
so that was an eye-opener. First shot I ever took, I couldn't see the basket. Jimmy Boylan, who we'll talk about, who now coaches the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, was the 2 guard. When I was on the floor, he moved over to the 2, and I played the point. And I passed to him with 4 seconds left on the shot clock. He passed it right back to me. So I got to shoot, and I got a 6'6" guard guarding me, and I lofted it over him, and it went in, you know. So that was luck. So I scored 4 points in that game, first game. We lost. We got hammered. We lost by 29. But that was my introduction to college. First game I ever played. Second game was against Boston College at home.
So in high school, your goals are probably a little bit different than what you set for goals in college. I mean, in high school, you know, state championships realistic, you know, all-state realistic. Get into college, it's, you know, national championship might not be realistic, or All-American might not be realistic. How did you set your goals, and what were the realistic ones that you set once you got to UMAINE?
I wanted to get better. Wanted to be known as a player. I'm coming in at Maine, and I didn't think it was fair. Known for just being a scorer. And I think my ability to create was underrated, to pass. My ability to rebound was underrated, I thought. Even my defense, believe it or not, was because when you're known for offense, they don't want to talk about your defense. But that's where the lateral quickness came in. So, and you're not going to stay on the floor if you can't play defense.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of show that I could be more than just a scorer. And obviously, being a scorer at that level is going to be harder. You're not going to average 30 D1. If you do, you're an NBA player, which I'm certainly not, mainly because of physicality. But I wanted to be a starter. I wanted our team to have success in conference. Conference play was foreign to me. Back then, Boston University was in our league, Northeastern with Reggie Lewis. New York teams, there was Siena, Colgate, Niagara out of Niagara Falls, Vermont, and UNH and us. That made it. Hartford also, University of Hartford. So, I didn't know how good those teams were. They were pretty good. I mean, the Siena teams 1 year won one game in the NCAA tournament and lost in overtime in the next round to go to the Sweet 16. So, Dredrick Irving, who's Kyrie Irving's dad, played for BU. I played against. He was outstanding. But Reggie Lewis, Northeastern, was like different level. I mean, NBA All-Star, blocked Michael Jordan's shot 3 times in one game. So I remember that my freshman year, we go to play them for the first time, and everyone's telling me, "Oh, Reggie Lewis, Player of the Year in our conference as a sophomore. 6'7", 6'8", unbelievable player." So I'm like, "Wow, this is gonna be fun." So we play, and we actually played him really, really tough. We lost by 2, and I remember thinking, "Man, you guys told me how awesome Reggie Lewis was. Didn't seem like he was awesome." So then I checked the stat sheet after the game, and 29 points, 15 rebounds, 11 assists, 6 blocks, 4 steals, no turnovers.
And that's the office.
Yeah, that's how he was with the Celtics. I don't know if you remember watching him, but after a Celtic game, if someone were to ask you, "How do you think Reggie did?" You'd say, "I don't know, 13 points." No, he had 24. Like, really? He just unbelievable, and of course, tragic what happened to him. So yeah, our conference was pretty good. The Hartford teams were good. It was, you didn't have any days off, that's for sure. And then of course our non-conference schedule, where we'd always play some big time programs like Big Ten teams. We played Providence in '86, my sophomore year. Actually, we played Providence all 4 years, but my sophomore year, Rick Pitino was their coach, and they went to the Final Four that year. Right. And I went head to head against their point guard, Billy Donovan, who later went on to coach Florida, was assistant with Pitino at Kentucky, head coach at Florida, won 2 titles, is now the coach of the Thunder, Oklahoma City Thunder. And when we played them the year they went to the Final Four, he guarded me, and I had 14 points on him the first half, and then they put somebody else on me second half. I didn't have 14 that half.
Yes, that's something else I wanted to ask. What are some of the non-conference games that stick out, whether it's the venue or the players that you got to play against playing at UMAINE?
Yeah. I always thought going into Boston was fun. My coach, Skip Chappell, was good friends with Casey Jones, who at that time was the head coach of the Celtics. Of course, 85, 86, 87, those are great Celtic teams. The 86 team is sometimes in the discussion for greatest team ever. So because he knew Casey Jones, we would be able to go watch the Celtics play if they were in town, for one thing. But even better, we would go to their practices. I got to rebound for McHale and DJ, talking to those guys. But Larry Bird always stayed right away from us. Funny story, one of our teammates who hated the Celtics, he was like mad that we're going to watch a Celtics practice. So we're walking into the gym, and Bill Walton had just had surgery on both of his feet. You know how Bill Walton's always injured. Yeah. So he's trying to bring a folding chair so he can sit down while on crutches, and he's having a hard time. So he turns to the guy who hates the Celtics, and he says, "Excuse me, young man, do you mind carrying this chair for me?" What do you think my teammate said? "No, get somebody else." Yeah. You just said no to Bill Walton. Are you kidding me? So that was always really fun. Other teams, Michigan State, my sophomore year, we beat Michigan State, which was considered the greatest win in UMAINE history. We beat them at home, and they had 2 NBA players on that team. And Judd Heathcote, same guy who coached Magic Johnson, was their head coach. We were down 15 at halftime. I had 5 points in the first half. Second half, we come out, and Judd Heathcote was famous for a 3-2 matchup zone. That was his thing. That's what he taught, kind of like Jim Boeheim in Syracuse with the 2-3. And that actually played into our favor, I thought, because man-to-man athletically, if they had played a straight man, we would not have physically been able to match up. But he was married to that 3-2 zone, and we were able to find holes in it. And I had a teammate named Jeff Holmes, who ended up being a coach at Caribou for a few years. And he was his own buster. I mean, he would struggle against man, but lights out shooter. He and I used to have some incredible games, of course. He hit 7 threes in the second half. I hit 5. I ended up at 23. He ended up at 21. Mike Bitterman, a kid from New Jersey, our forward who was 6'8", he ended up with 19, and Jimmy Boylan had 17. And we beat Michigan State 84-81. So and I remember I kissed the Bangor Auditorium floor after we won that game. So that was a good one. Wisconsin, I played in a tournament in Marquette, which is in Milwaukee. It's called the Bradley Center back then. It was the first year of the Bradley Center where the Bucks played. I remember getting iced up in the training room with Ricky Pierce, who was a Milwaukee Bucks player, and we were kind of talking. So we played the Wisconsin Badgers, and I don't know if you know, but Big Ten is notorious for physical play. Yeah. And I had 23 that game, so I made the all-tournament team, which was kind of cool. DePaul, which back at that time, the school out of Chicago, right, was a higher echelon program. They had just lost to UNLV by 4 in Hawaii. And we're playing them, and I think UNLV ended up winning it, or they went in '89. They went pretty far, I know. Larry Johnson and those guys, and we were there. We hung with them. We ended up losing, I think, by 16, but it was a 9-point game. Had 18 that game, so played in the Palestra. I don't know if you ever heard of that in Philadelphia. Really? Yeah, the Big Five. Yeah. The Palestra. We played LaSalle. They had a guy named Lionel Simmons, who ended up being Player of the Year for NCAA. Played for the Kings in the NBA. And another guy who I know you know because he's an ESPN analyst now, Tim Legler.
Oh, yeah.
Legs, right? He actually won a 3-point contest one year in the NBA, All-Star Weekend. He could shoot. So we played them in the Palestra. That's an incredible atmosphere. We actually played them at home, too. I didn't have a really good game in Philly my freshman year, but my sophomore year, I think I had 20 against them at home, but we couldn't beat them. So those are – and Boston College was always a good game. Going up against Dana Barros. Funny story about that. I had a good game against them in Boston. I think I had 20 points. And years later, I was able to go to a Boston Celtic practice when he was with the Celtics. And it must have been years later because I had 2 of my children with me. I was able to get into the practice. Jimmy Boylan, who was now an assistant coach of the Rockets at that time, and Rudy Tomjanovich, he arranged, because the Rockets were in town, he arranged for me to be able to take my kids into the Celtics practice and the Rockets practice. So there's Dana Barros. And for the heck of it, he's shooting around, and I go, Dana. He comes over, and I go, you remember me? And I'm thinking, there's no way in heck he's going to remember me. He looks at me and he says, yeah, I do. And I'm thinking, he's lying. So I go, who am I? He goes, Rossignol, UMAINE. So I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So he did remember. He did remember. And those would be the bigger games, certainly, when you played the Power 5 conference teams. And it's just, I'm 6'1". My playing weight in Maine was 165. And point guards are 6'4", 210. Just I figure I'll be quicker than them. No.
Always the case.
So those are some of the bigger opponents we played. But I do remember my sophomore year, that game in Boston, the game I had a really good game. We're doing layup drills, and all of a sudden the crowd starts to get loud. It was like an awkward time. We were just in layup drills. And all of a sudden I realized why. Red Auerbach had just signed Darren Day. I don't know if you remember that name. He played for UCLA, but he had just signed this guy, Darren Day, and I'm assuming he wanted to take him somewhere to see a basketball game while he was in Boston, and I'll take him to the BC game. And Red Auerbach and Darren Day sit right under the basket that we're going to be shooting at first half. I go 4 for 4 from the 3-point line first half. So anyway, I ended up with 18 or 20. As I said, we lost. He left at halftime. He didn't stick around for the second half. So we're in our hotel room after the game, and my coach knocks on my door. He says, Matt, come on, we're all going down. We're taking the bus to go get something to eat. And I said, no, I don't want to leave. He goes, why? I said, I'm waiting by the phone. Red Auerbach should be calling in.
Call ever come?
No, and that call never came. To think that Red Auerbach got to see a guy from Van Buren, Maine, shoot. And Red Auerbach is, when you talk about the history of basketball. Legendary. So, I mean, that's pretty special, really,
So obviously, the career you had in high school to have that success in college probably didn't work out the same way, but curious, in your opinion, when you look back on your college career, do you have any regrets? Did it play out how you wanted it to play out? Did it kind of turn out the way you thought it would turn out? Just curious looking back on how you feel about college years.
If I have a regret, it's that probably I wish I would have shot a little more my first 3 years. My coach kind of wanted me to be more of a pure point guard, and that was fine. But I probably averaged 10 shots a game my first 3 years. I averaged double-figure points. I think for my career, I averaged 12 points a game at Maine. Ended up at 1,300 points, which when I graduated put me 7th all time. Made a couple all-star teams. Led the league in free throw percentage once, 3-point percentage twice. My freshman year, we didn't have a 3-point line. It hadn't come in yet. The year we beat Michigan State, I was the first year of the 3-point line. So made all academic teams. So I had success. I just wish I would have been a little more forceful and willing to try to do a lot of the things I did at Maine, like going one-on-one. It didn't do not nearly as much as I did in high school. And some of that is due to the level of competition, the defense, certainly. But if I have any regret, it's that, and not having postseason success. We never got out of the quarterfinals my 4 years at Maine. So to see my daughter experience her experience at Maine, win 2 championships and play an NCAA tournament, it's one of the reasons I'm envious of her. And she lets me know it. Don't forget it.
I'm also wondering too, I know for a lot of people, when they put so much time into a sport and they go and play in college, once they get to college, the amount of effort you have to put into it, it can become like a job, and maybe you lose love of the game or passion for it. Like, was that ever the case for you, or did you just love basketball and it was never, a chore, or it was never work? It was always fun. Like, what was it like for you, once you got 3 or 4 years of college?
Yeah, well, after my junior year, I got married that summer, going into my senior year, to my high school sweetheart, who I'm still married to this day, 32 years, Monique Dion, formerly Monique Dion. So my priorities started to change a little bit. I wanted to win. I had opportunities to play in Europe. I had opportunities to play in France after my freshman year, but I certainly wasn't going to leave college to go play in Europe. So I had opportunities to do that. Something my wife and I both were not interested. We were ready to, start our lives. So I remember the last game, we lost to Northeastern my senior year in the quarterfinal of what used to be called the North Atlantic Conference. It's called America East now. And when we lost, I was disappointed that we lost, but I also remember thinking, wow, it was like a weight, there's no more pressure. I mean, there's no more expectations anymore. And, the demands of Division I basketball are incredible as far as time commitment. They basically own you. You couldn't come home for vacations ever. I had to lie if I wanted to come home, tell it was my grandmother's birthday. My coach finally said, how many grandmothers do you have? And my wife, when my freshman year, she's a year younger than me. So my freshman year of college, she was still in high school. So, those things like that, and family's really, really important to me. So when my career was over, I was disappointed we lost, but not disappointed that I was going to be done with basketball as a player. I'm still going to play the men's leagues for a little while, although I didn't do that for too long either. Once I started having children, my priority, I was no longer the center of the circle. My family's going to be the center of the circle, and kind of step away from the game, but not completely, because when I started coaching.
Yeah. So I'm curious, was coaching always in the back of your mind, or is it something that just kind of happened?
Yeah, it was not in the back of my mind. Originally I went to school to be a lawyer, Tommy Pelletier. I felt I wanted to stay involved in the game some way, or teaching kids. So I started taking education courses starting my junior year in college. So I knew I was going to go to school I was going to become a teacher. And I thought basketball, because of my name, might help me get a teaching job. It might give me an edge. So I applied for 2. I looked in the newspaper. I knew I wanted to come back to the county. So I was looking for a school that had a social studies job and a varsity boys basketball job. And in that summer of '89, there were only 2, Ashland and Holton. Okay. So I sent my stuff into both schools. If there are Ashland people listening, anyway, Ashland never called me back, never wrote me back. I got nothing from him. So apparently I wasn't good enough to go to Ashland. And then Holton immediately wanted me to go. My coach, Skip Chappelle, knew people, made some phone calls to help me out. Got the job in the summer of '89, and was going to teach middle school social studies and be the varsity boys basketball coach starting in the winter of '89.
So I was thinking about this earlier when I was trying to think of things to talk about. So I feel like at the time, a lot of the basketball coaches were established, and, a lot of these coaches have been in schools for a very, very long time. And here you come as a young guy, with a name and a reputation. Did you feel heat from some of these other coaches? Like, this young guy just comes in here fresh out of college, gets a varsity gig. Like, did you feel any heat from any of the other coaches, or was it all kind of more welcoming?
Yeah, no, I thought people were very nice to me. I'll never forget Tim Prescott was the head coach at Presque Isle. And like I said, my former teammate, Jeff Holmes, had just finished his first year at Caribou. So immediately, I'm kind of learning, you got to play summer basketball. I got to, since I was named the coach in June, I was going to run a summer program with my Holton players who I had to meet first. And so I'm scheduling mostly Caribou and Presque Isle, who were going to play in the summertime. And I remember Tim Prescott wrote me a nice letter, welcoming me, wishing me luck. I've never forgotten that. And I kind of got, a little bit of a rookie indoctrination. So for summer league basketball, I'm throwing all our stuff in that we're going to run in the winter, and Prescott's just letting his Prescott guys play with no structure. And we beat Prescott by 30 in summer basketball. I'm thinking, man, this is going to go on my coaching record, you know. Yeah. And so then we play him when it counted in the winter. We didn't beat him because I had shown all my stuff and he didn't show anything. Yeah. So that was kind of a lesson for me to be learned. And I coached 4 years at Holton, enjoyed it. People there were very good to me. Tough town to coach in. They have, not in a bad way, and that basketball is important.
High expectations, right?
Yeah, that's what you want to coach in a town where it's important. And it was important in Holton. So I coached there 4 years. Marty Bouchard, of course, Kyle Bouchard and Colleen Bouchard's dad was my middle school coach when I was there. Rob Moran was my JV coach. So they both sat on the bench with me. Both of them went on to win state championships at coaches, which I've never done. But great guys to be around, very knowledgeable, and more importantly, great friends. Still to this day. So coached there 4 years. We made the tournament 3 times. Lost a double overtime heartbreaker to Madawaska Academy 1 year. I know Larry Murphy and Lon and those guys talked about a game that they needed to win to get into the tournament against Holton.
Was it you guys?
That was me. I was the coach. And Larry Murphy is another man I think the world of and respect. He's an unbelievable great coach, but more importantly, he's a great man and someone that I've learned a lot from. And I still tease him. We played in a men's tournament together one time, and he'll tell you this. We combined for 62 points in that game. It was against Loring Air Force Base. He had 1, I had 61. That's
I'll have to ask him about that one next time.
He'll tell you that. Yeah, GTBMR, give the ball to Matt Rossignol and get the heck out of the way. That's what we were running that night. And
it worked well.
But yeah, I remember after we lost the game, it was basically a play-in game, even though it wasn't. Yeah. We were both sitting 8-9, and whoever won was going to go in, and whoever lost. And I think the game might have gone to overtime, and they won. And Larry, you know how intense he is and passionate, and disappointed we lost, but sincerely and honestly happy for that guy. And I went in the locker room after and told him so. And we're great friends to this day.
You mentioned how, once you were done playing at UMAINE, you were kind of ready to turn it off and start the next phase of your life. Being a new head coach, I'm curious, like, how hard was it at times when kids weren't doing it right, or they thought maybe they were doing it a certain way, you didn't like it? How hard was it to not just want to step out there and say, all right, give me the ball, check up, let's go? Like, do you ever feel like the need to get out there and, like, show them how to do it?
Yeah, early on, I was willing to do that, but at some point, I remember I came home one day and my wife had to remind me, it's not about you anymore. I'm like, I know, but it's been about me for so long that was a transition. But there were times when, if I knew we were going to be playing a junk defense against some team that had a stud player, I remember Chris Funk from Caribou. I don't know if you remember that name.
Yeah.
When we were preparing our defense, I said, okay, guys, we're going to be playing a box of 1 on him. So I'll suit up today and I'll be him and we'll work on the defense that way. So, yeah, I had some success against my own teams. I had a player, one funny story. I had a player who was a little bit cocky, a little bit edge to him. And at the end of practice one time, he said, Coach, you weren't that good. Let's play 1-on-1. I was 25 years old, so I'm still, okay. And I was like, what are you talking, So, all right. So he said, you can even have first ball. So head fake, drive, 2-hand dunk, 1-0. Make it, take it, head fake, drive, 2-hand dunk, 2-0. I said, go shower up.
That was it.
He didn't challenge me to 1-on-1 anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't know that Holton was your first stop. Did it come up a while back on the podcast I had done, and I didn't know about that. So obviously you got your start there, but then had a chance to go home. So
yeah, I had a chance.
How'd the Van Buren job come up?
Yeah. So a position I was informed, I don't remember who told me. I was working at Bill Cassavant's. He used to run a camp at NMCC. You may have gone to it, Rustic Valley, I think it was called. And I get a phone call there, and it's Bill. Bill says, Matt, it's Van Buren. They're calling. They want to talk to you. Okay. It's a middle school English position, which I wasn't certified for, but varsity boys basketball. So I told him, I said, I'm not certified for English. They said, that's fine. You can work towards it if you really want to come home. And so I did. I went for it and started coaching there in the fall of 93. State. And so my alma mater, that was, kind of cool. And to be home where my parents and my wife's from Grand Isle, which you may know is between Van Buren and Madawaska. So to be able to have my children experience both sets of grandparents and my both sets of grandparents to be a part of my children's lives was something that was really important to me. So went from a Class B Holton to Class D Van Buren, but I didn't care about that. I mean, coaching is coaching. It's all relative. And had some good teams from 93 to 98. My last year in Van Buren, we lost in the final to Jones Sport Beals. Nathan Markey, name you may have heard, was a junior that year, outstanding player. So was hoping, since I couldn't bring a gold ball as a player to my hometown, I was hoping so bad I could bring one as a coach, but fell just short in that last game. But had 5 good years. 4 years we went to the tournament. Never lost a quarterfinal in those years, and 1 year made it to the final. But
you ever lose to Fort Kent during that time?
Yes, we did. Some of those Ryan Martin teams were good. We upset them 1 year, though. They had a really tall kid, 6'6". I forget what his name was, but not Mitch Willett. It was before him.
Chad Fournier, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
One of those guys?
It was 98. It was that year. It was my last year we beat them. So, but yeah, the Ryan Martin teams were really good. And my Van Buren teams those weren't my best Van Buren teams. But that Fort Kent team was good. So.
Any additional pressures, like coming home and coaching at home? Like, did you feel it from the community, or was it all open arms? Or
no, if there was, I never heard it. The people were very supportive, and I think I kind of earned, a pedigree. So there was respect there for my knowledge and my experiences going back to not just my high school career, but at Maine. So I mean, you're never going to be a high school coach and please everybody. So I'm sure there were some people, if I wasn't playing their kid or whatever, but never outwardly in front of me. If they're doing it at their homes, who cares, So no, it was very positive experience. It was tough to leave Van Buren when I did in '98, but it was the right thing for me to do at that time.
Yeah, so Madawaska was the next stop. So what came into the decision making to go to Madtown?
Money. I mean, my wife graduated from Husson College, but early on, we decided that we didn't want to do the daycare thing. We wanted to have our children be raised by my wife at home, and that's something she wanted to do. And I would support her either way, but she wanted to raise our children and not do the daycare thing. So one salary, is a challenge, certainly. So when Madawaska, back in 1998, I believe, was the second highest paying school district in the state of Maine to Cape Elizabeth. So to be able to get a substantial pay raise, it was something that would have been irresponsible of me as a father and head of a family to not do. So made the change, and it just so happened the coaching position was open, ironically replacing Robert Plord, Fort Kent guy. Became a great friend. In fact, I took Robert to see the Celtics and Pacers practice later on, because Rick Carlisle was the coach, the Pistons. Rick Carlisle was the coach, and my college coach, Skip Chappelle, arranged for us to go to Boston and get into the Pistons practice when Rick Carlisle was, and I took Robert with me because he's a diehard Celtic fan. I don't know if you know that about Rob, but we became great friends. So I started coaching Madawaska in 1998.
And you had a good team you were inheriting. So I'm curious, as a basketball player, you add different things to your game every year, become a better player. What did you add, or how did you evolve as a coach from first stop in Holton to going to Van Buren? By the time you get to Madtown, how would you evolve as a coach up until that point? To
be honest with you, I probably wasn't ready to be a varsity coach when I first started at Holton. I mean, coaching is a lot different than playing. Believe it or not, offensively was the thing that I sometimes had a harder time getting across to my players, because I didn't really have to think too much about offense. It kind of came naturally, but I had to think about defense. So teaching defense was something I actually found easier to do, especially when you talk about zone offense. Teaching zone offense is more conceptual versus man. I can show you where you want to go in an offense structurally, but understanding zone offense is understanding defensive principles and what the defense is trying to do and how you can counter that. So I think I got a lot better at that through my 4 years at Holton and my 5 years at Van Buren. So I think when I came to Madawaska, I was a lot better coach than I was when I was at Holton. And I feel bad about that for Holton, but I don't think I did a terrible job at Holton. But I probably, at 22 years old, I probably wasn't ready to be a varsity coach, but it is what it is. And I was blessed, like you said, my first year to have some pretty good talent at Madawaska. Probably the best player for males relative to the gender that I ever coached. Andrew Clavette, of course, my daughter Patty's certainly relative to gender would be the most dominant player I ever coached. I know that sounds biased, but Andrew, I had him just for 1 year. Big regret. Wish I could have coached him longer. We had a really good season. I think we were 15-3. Went to the tournament ranked number 6, and just really we didn't play nearly to our ability, and lost a Madawaska team, but it was a competitive game. But Andrew was on that team. Ben Marshall, Rusty Nato, Guy Michaud, Eric Gendreau. Good team. Yeah.
And you were never afraid to play young guys. And I'm curious, what was your thought process behind that? I mean, for some coaches, it's you got to earn your spot, earn your time. But you were never afraid to put your best players out there.
Yeah, that's and that's hard, especially when it's your first year at a school. So I know when I came to Madawaska, there was a senior who had started the year before as a junior, and when I came in, I threw Guy and Rusty, who were sophomores, immediately into the starting lineup, and that was hard. And I won't name the kid, but that was hard on him. But I was honest with him. I think as a coach, the number one thing your players deserve is honesty. But you don't want to leave them not knowing. So one of the things I always try to do as a coach is to be honest and open with players. Here's why he's playing over you. Here's what you need to do to get better and to, perhaps surpass him. It's when kids are left not knowing that the frustration and problems can develop. So that's always been one of my coaching. And I don't care what your last name is, where your house is in town, how much money your parents earn. First of all, not being a community member of Madawaska, I didn't know those things. Okay. So what's going to give me the best chance to win? That's what I'm going to put on the floor. Now, do we always get that right as coaches? No. Sometimes coaches should be playing someone more than somebody else, but you hope that you're making an honest decision when you decide playing time. But whatever decision you make, you want to be honest with all your players.
So during your time at Madawaska too, you also coached one of your children for the first time, Dom.
So Dom came in 06, and we had just had a really good run with Alan Campbell and Mark Sirwa and Kenny Sirwa. Of course, tragically passed away after his junior year. Miles Morneau, and it was interesting that when I got there, my athletic director, somebody else who I think the world of, a great man, Ed Marshall, former coach of Madawaska going back to the 70s, he had informed me. He says, "Did you know that you are stepping into a coaching position that does not have a lot of tradition?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Madawaska is one of the few schools that has never won a game in the Bangor Auditorium, girls or boys." I said, "Really?" So there, you know how Michael Jordan, if you watch The Last Dance, there's always something that gets him motivated.
Right.
I said, that would be a pretty good notch in my belt if I could be a coach to give Madawaska its first tournament win. So Miles Morneau's senior year, we were able to do that. In fact, we upset your team that year.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that one. I don't want to talk about that again.
Yeah. So we had upset you guys at home. That kind of put us up in the standings. But you beat us pretty good at your place, though, as I recall.
Yeah.
So and you beat Prescal that year, I'm pretty sure.
We did, yeah.
Yeah. So that made, we beat Fort Kent. That made us feel like we were pretty good. So we went to Bangor, ranked number 4 that year, and played George Stevens Academy, who has a rich tradition in basketball. And we just played really, really well. And Miles Morneau made some key free throws down the stretch, and we got the school's first tournament win ever. I'll never forget Ed Marshall, the AD, after we win. I mean, to show you the type of man he is, he was so happy for us, and he's hugging me and he's crying. And he had just found out that his son Ben who had been in Iraq, was coming home, and it was going to be safe. So it was one of those floods of emotions. We win, and Ed Marshall's son's going to be coming home safe. It was one of those. You have a lot of moments in life that it's ecstasy, natural highs. And it was an incredible feeling to do that for a town that used to be your rival, to come in and lead them to a tournament win. So that was really special.
Also curious, what was it like going back to Van Buren as the Madawaska coach? Like we mentioned how, there was no additional pressure when you were at Van Buren as a coach. They treated you good. What was it like when you went back as a coach?
It was tough, because I still live in Van Buren. And when I left Van Buren, we had just lost in the championship. So it's not like I was leaving junk. And Nate Markey's coming back for his senior year. So the first game we played was in Van Buren, and that's Andrew Clavet's team. And the game went to double or triple overtime, and my team won. So that was kind of cool. And then we beat them pretty handily back in Madawaska. But the Van Buren people have always been really good about that. In fact, this year, that whole scenario replayed itself because I returned to coaching the Madawaska boys this year after having coached the Van Buren girls for 9 years. And I had to go coach in Van Buren, our first game of the year, my first game with the new Madawaska team. And we were down 25-2 at halftime. Robbie Loze, probably my best player. Yeah, he's my best player. Sprained his ankle 2 minutes into the game. And my other I started 2 freshmen, just didn't react. And Coach LaPierre of Van Buren did a great job. So that was humbling. You talk about the walk of shame. At halftime, 25-2, my return to Van Buren gym, walking from that walk. I didn't go fast on purpose, but I wanted to get in there fast. We improved, the second time we played Van Buren at home that year, 2-point game, so you always you measure yourself by how you are at the beginning of the season and how you are at the end of the season.
So we mentioned how at Madawaska you had a chance to coach Dom. Went back to Van Buren to coach your daughter. So what was the decision making in that? Was it specifically for that?
Yes. I'll go back to Dom a little bit. He deserves a little mention. So that was tough. He wanted to come to Madawaska for academic purposes. I think they had a creative writing class in Madawaska that they didn't offer in Van Buren, so that was justification. So coaching him was fun. Dom is like his father. He can be stubborn sometimes. But his junior year was Mark Sirwa and Alan Campbell's senior year. And we were able to go to Bangor, and we played Washington Academy in that quarterfinal. And 29-5 at halftime, we were up. And actually took a 35-5 lead into the third quarter. And we just blew their doors off. Lost to those great Calais teams in the semifinal, 10-point game. So we were the second best team in the division, but Calais
was a good team. Those were some great Calais teams.
Yeah, they won states, in fact, so we had a chance. I had a Fort Kent kid on that team. Matt Bollier, who had played for Fort Kent earlier, was on that team. So coaching Dom was a lot of fun, talented. I felt bad for Dom in a lot of respects. The pressure to be like your dad. I never really talked to him about it too much, but that couldn't have been easy. Like my younger brother, Luke, who had to kind of play after me, sometimes can be unrealistic expectations. Kind of like Andre following in Padiz's footsteps. People expect the same results. Sometimes that's not fair. But overall, he handled it very well. So having a chance to coach my daughter, I actually coached her in middle school for 2 years. When I got done at Madawaska in 2007, took a year off from coaching, and then Padiz's seventh grade year became the middle school coach. So that was interesting. I'd never coached anything but varsity. Now I'm coaching middle school girls who are more worried about whether or not my clothes match and how my hair, when I had hair, how my hair looked. So, but coaching her was certainly a pleasure. But also the other girls, there was some good talent around Padiz's teams.
So I'm curious what that was like. I mean, obviously, she had a good high school career as well. And real quick, I just want to ask you a question. I mean, obviously 23,000 points or 2,300 points that you scored, which is, I took a look at it, currently 6th all time in the state of Maine. That's where you currently sit, but you're 2nd in your household. So.
And she reminds me of that. Of course, I try to tease her. I says, yeah, but I didn't have the 3-point line, honey. I probably would have more, but no, she was, she's uber talented. And I saw it at an early age. And one of the things that's helped her is she has these unusually long fingers. Her hands are bigger than mine, and she shoots a ball. I mean, she's an incredible shooter. And growing up with 2 older brothers, Derek is another son of mine who's between Padiz and Dom, was a very talented basketball player too. Maybe a little less willing. Basketball probably wasn't as important to Derek, but he could play. So growing up with 2 older brothers, that's who she's playing against. I've always told girls, if you want to excel in girls' sports, play against guys. Yeah. That's something that Padiz did at an early age. But you saw it as a 7th grader. She would have been the best player on the varsity team. She would have averaged 20 a game as a 7th grader on a varsity team. So I was looking forward to coaching her and her teammates. Felicia Bouchard, 1,000-point scorer. Courtney Parent, I believe, was maybe 150 points away. Ashley Wilson, who was older than Padiz, but she ended up 900-something points. So once again, like I mentioned during my career, as good as you are, if your teammates aren't good, it's going to be hard for you to be successful.
What kind of parallels would you see coaching her, along with, her versus you going through high school? Like, did you see it very, very similar in terms of how your careers went along?
She probably saw straight man-to-man defense in her 89-game career 3 times. I mean, her first game, her freshman year, she had 33 points, the first varsity game ever. So right away it was okay. So kind of put a little pressure on me to come up with schemes. There are games when she had 2 defenders on her. Not boxing 1, 2 on her wherever she went. So that could be a challenge. But she developed a jump shot early. I mean, I got pictures of her, 2 or 3 feet off the ground, the ball still in her hands. So and her ball handling was able to get her shots. But having good teammates helped too, and who could score. Felicia Bouchard, knockdown shooter. She could, if you double team Padiz and left somebody open, Padiz could find them and make shots. But yeah, a lot of parallels between her and I. She probably was a better shooter than me in high school, I would say. But that kind of helped her a lot, certainly. But score, I mean, she averaged 30 points a game. She ended up with 2,600 points. That's a lot of points. She's second to Cindy. 2,589. I think she's 7 points away.
7 points behind Cindy Blodgett. I'm looking at it right now. 7 points behind Cindy all time. So my question for you as coach is, why didn't you give her the green light? All she needed was 7 more points, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, she had the biggest green light known to mankind. I mean, I remember Pete Maravich's father telling a story about, because Pete Maravich played at LSU, has still the all-time scoring record for NCAA, played for his dad, and one player on that team went up to Coach Maravich one time and said, geez, Coach, I think I should be getting a few more shots than Pete is getting. And Press, which was his nickname, Press Maravich said, he says, I really like you as a player, but I love him. So no, I try to win. And like I said, when I coached Dom, he wasn't the best player on the team his junior year, so he didn't get the most shots. I got to believe that whoever Coach Padiz should have, anyway, done the same schemes that I did, but understanding how to go against boxing ones and things like that gave me a little bit of advantage to help her out.
And you guys just happened to run into some very good Washburn teams, and you guys came over the hump. So that was the roadblock for you guys.
We were the second best team in Class D for 3 straight years. And just those Washburn teams, who we beat twice, during regular season, gave them their only 2 losses they had in 4 years. But there's too much. There's too much depth, and they kind of wore a good strategy. They had outstanding athletes too. I mean, Carson Koch won NCAA championships for running, and Carmen Bragg and Kenzie Worcester and Joan Overman. These girls were athletes, and they could wear Padiz down, whose athleticism was above average, but not extraordinarily above average. So they could wear her down over the course of a game, over 32 minutes.
It's like you said, it worked out all right because she got back-to-back conference championships and got to play in the NCAA tournament.
She did.
It worked out okay for her.
Yeah.
And we got to show love to the youngest son too. So Andre, I think, just got named head coach of the Caribou boys soccer, right?
He did. Andre, I'll tell you, of all my kids, is definitely the most athletic. He's super strong.
Loves the weight room. Loves the weight room, right?
Yeah, he does. He played soccer at Umpy for 2 years, played basketball at UMFK for 1 year. But he's great with kids. He just coached JV boys basketball for Caribou this year and was an assistant coach for that team that won the state championship. He's a player's coach. He knows that what's more important is developing relationships with your players than necessarily X's and O's, although he's very good with X's and O's too. So I'm really looking forward to him coaching soccer if we have a season, because of the coronavirus. So I'm very proud that the Caribou school system has deemed a 21-year-old mature enough and ready enough to coach a varsity soccer team. So very proud of him.
Just curious the pride you feel. I mean, it's one thing for your kids to follow in your footsteps and play basketball or play sports like you did, but to then follow you into coaching as well, like, as a dad, and like how prideful are you about that?
Yeah, very proud. I've always said the best thing you can ever do is help children, to grow, not just in the sport, but to be better people. I think I mentioned this in the podcast we did with the Madawaska guys. Years later, when former players still call you coach and still call you for advice on things, to me, that's what it's all about. You want to set an example for them, not just in basketball, but what it means to be a man, and how to lead your life as an example, teaching them positive values that will help make their life more healthy and happy. So my kids going into education, all of my kids are in education so far. I mean, Andre's coaching, but he's got a degree in teaching. She's an assistant coach. Dom is a teacher in Fort Kent. You may not get rich monetarily, but you're going to be rich in things that are probably more important.
So before we get to the end, where I ask you a bunch of random things here, I want to just touch on where you're at right now. So back at Madawaska coaching.
Yeah.
How much longer you want to go for?
Well, I figure I probably got 10 years left in coaching. So now that I'm teaching back in Van Buren, I'm still going to keep coaching basketball. I had a blast coaching this past winter. I thought my boys from game 1 to game 18 improved as much as any team I've ever coached. The teams we played that were really good were Fort Kent, of course, Central Aroostook, who went far in the tournament, that buzzer beater shot, the Van Buren team. We played those teams the first time, lost by 30. The second time, and Fort Fairfield as well, the gap was, we were right there. Our tournament game against Fort Kent didn't go as well, but we had a couple of things happen there that hurt one of my starters didn't come to the game, was sick, and another one hurt his back, couldn't play second. But Fort Kent was better than us. But I always look at improvement in this Madawaska team, and I got a lot coming back. Really looking forward to a great bunch. I started 2 freshmen. Robbie Lozier's coming back. I lose 2 important players in Riley Morneau and Michael Hebert, but it was really fun coaching them this winter, and I'm looking forward to it.
Right. So I just want to touch on a bunch of random things before we get up out of here. So you talked about it a little bit earlier, about how you didn't really do the men's league thing for very long after you were done playing. So I only have one experience of you actually being on the court with you. So
I know you're gonna.
for a little while, your brother Mark was opening up the gym, and I think it's New Sweden, like just some
Yeah.
random middle school gym. And then I'd gone there a couple weeks in a row. It was me and a couple college guys. He was there. My dad came one week, and then like the third week into it, you showed up. And Sam, my younger brother Sam, had just wrapped up his senior year of high school.
Good
And
play.
I remember him thinking, I'm going to show Matt. I'm going to show Matt how it's done. And you just proceeded to light him up. I don't even know the last time you'd played competitive. So
I don't remember if I lit anybody up, but I remember that night. I remember going there, and it was a lot of fun. But, yeah, the men's league thing, you know, it's like people expect you – I'm going to go to a men's league game and show everybody I'm going to score 40. I didn't want to do that. I played competitively in the Caribou Men's League my first year back in Van Buren. We went undefeated. That was good. And then right off into the sunset when I still have two good knees.
yeah, and I was curious. The other part of that was were you just tired of people coming at you? Like I'm guessing like everybody, if you showed up to an open gym or to a men's league game, like they wanted to go at you, and I'm guessing that could get old.
You know, I'm taking a jump shot and they're punching you in the groin area. And it's like, really? You know, what are you doing? I'm here for exercise. I'm here to have fun. I'm not here to show you how good I am or was or how many points. That's not what it was about for me. But unfortunately, that's how people looked at it. So I decided, you know what? I got two good knees. My wife's at home waiting for me. I got kids waiting for me. I'm going to ride off.
I'm going to keep it going. I like that. Another experience I had with you back in the day, my first experience with you, Tiger basketball camp. I used to go there as a child, and you were one of the guys. I think you were always the guy who would like do like you'd speak, give a little coaching demonstration or something like that.
Yeah.
Are you still doing Tiger camp?
Yeah, well, it was canceled this year. For
Yeah.
the first time in 32 years, Larry Gardner, head coach at Fort Fairfield girls, used to be the boys, great friend of mine, great coach. And, yeah, I've been doing that for I did Aroostook Valley for Bill Cassidy for a while, and then I switched over. I don't know how many years it's been, 20 anyway. And, yeah, Larry would let me do that shooting thing and kind of talk about, you know, some of the bigger things in life about trying to help kids stay on the straight path. And having that opportunity to do that, I've always promised myself that you have a chance to you know, impart words of wisdom to our youth, don't ever pass up that opportunity.
I'm guessing you had an opportunity to speak and work at a lot of basketball camps too, right? Not just the Tiger one.
Yeah, I've worked at Gold Star, which was in South Portland. I've worked at UMAINE camps, of course, more when I had just left Maine. I worked at Pine Tree a few times. I've run my own camps. I've done individual sessions with people. Bryce Lozier, when he was, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, his dad, Chris, hired me to work with him. I did a couple sessions with him, one in Fort Kent, one in Van Buren. So
Worked out well for him.
Yeah, he turned out okay, didn't he? So, anytime you see a Valley guy, I mean, that makes me so happy. I'm being from the Valley is something that's important, really important to me, and something I take great pride in. Whether it's Van Buren, Madawaska, Wisdom, or Fort Kent, it's just a great place to have been raised in and to continue to live in.
So this is another question I've wondered because, and it kind of goes along with men's league and why you stopped playing. And like I thought one of the reasons would be because people would constantly try to go at you and prove to you like, oh, I'm better. But I'm curious. I'm wondering, you know, if you could go and match up against anybody that came before you or after you, like who's that player you would have loved to have matched up and gone head to head against to measure yourself against? Whether, you know, there was someone who came out later on and they say, no, this guy would have beat you, or someone before you. Like, who's that guy you would have loved to square up against?
You're gonna laugh at my answer. My son, Andre. Because Andre likes to kind of half jokingly say that basketball when I played wasn't any good and it's so much better now. You wouldn't have fit in the modern day. You wouldn't have been as good relative to your time to now. So he doesn't realize, yeah, the game changes over time, but if you were a player, you were a player, you know? So yeah. I would love to be able to be in my prime and play my son, Andre, in one-on-one so I could end that talk in a hurry.
How about somebody outside the family? If it had to be someone outside the family.
Yeah, I'm going to reciprocate my great friend, Tommy, because growing in the Valley, he was the standard. And then I think, you know, I came along and we were always compared. So I know he had mentioned me when you asked him that question. So I'm going to shoot it right back at him. We actually played a couple of men's league tournaments together. And that was a lot of fun. So that would be the one. And it would be very sportsmanlike knowing Tommy and the respect that we have for each other. But that would be the game.
Be a lot of points scored in that one, probably.
A lot of shots.
Looking back on your playing days, what's the one gym you love to go in and play? What was like either the school or the gym itself, the environment? Like which one did you get all excited for?
Oh, beside the Bangor Auditorium, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I think Holton's gym because of the wraparound. the auditorium effect, that there were seats behind both sides. That was an area, a school that I like to play against, which is ironic because I ended up coaching there for 4 years. That would be the one. Of course, Caribou, with this, the biggest capacity that you could have. And we played there my junior year to a full house. So that was a lot of fun. And of course, the Valley schools were always good too because of, what we shared in common. So those were good places too.
I asked you earlier your toughest loss. How about your best moment? As it could be a coach or a player. Like, what's that one victory that kind of sticks out the most for you?
Oh my God! Well, as a player, I would have to say beating Michigan State my sophomore year at home kind of put us on the map a little bit, and for me to really enforce the idea that I can play at the highest level and play well. I can play against NBA players and play well. A little guy from Buren, Maine, can play against Power 5 conferences. I had 23 against Michigan State, 23 against Wisconsin. So it kind of validated that I'm at that level. So it was for that. Coaching wise, probably bringing Madawaska its first tournament win ever was very gratifying. Coaching my daughter into a championship her senior year would be very, very important too, very big. And just being able to share in all my kids, the ones that I coach, at least their successes, and get to be there when they're enjoying the benefits of winning.
So basketball can be a vessel. It can take you all kinds of places. It can take you all around the world. It can introduce you to all kinds of people. You got to do a whole ton of it. So I'm curious, looking back on it, coaching, playing, traveling, what's the coolest thing that you look back on that basketball has allowed you to do or allowed you to meet? What's like the one thing that sticks up if you had to pick one?
Yeah. Boy, that's a great question. The best thing about basketball is it's given me an opportunity to be a role model. And I tried to live my life that way. I've taken that seriously. No one's perfect, certainly, but knowing that people are looking up to you, I think it made me even more aware of trying to live life the right way. But I look at a guy like Jimmy Boylan, a teammate of mine. He's the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. That's pretty cool. A guy that I know really well. I saw a guy named Bruce Lindbergh who coached me in an All-Star game one time, and he's working at a camp in Colorado. And then the next summer I see him, he says, "Matt, I need to ask you something. Do you know Sean Elliott?" I'm like, "Yeah, what?" He says, "Because I was at a camp last summer and I was introduced to him and I told him I was from Maine. And the first thing he said is, 'Do you know Matt Rossignol?'" I'm like, "That's pretty cool."
Cool.
Going back to our days when we went to 5-star camp. So just getting to know a lot of people. I mean, Skip Chappell, I haven't really spoken about him enough. My college coach, who's the most loyal coach you could ever have, goes out of it. I remember one time I called him, I want to take my kids to see the Celtics. And because of his connection with the Celtics, Skip was actually drafted by the Celtics. So he knows everybody there. So I said, "Coach, it's Matt. How you doing? And says, I want to take my kids to the Celtics. Any way you can get me some tickets?" And he says, "Let me see what I can do. I'll call you right back." So 5 minutes later, he calls me back and he says, "Yeah, I got you some tickets. I got some from John." And I'm like, "Oh, John who? John Havlicek?" You just called John Havlicek to get me tickets? Like, a legend of the game,
Yeah.
So things like that, it goes to show, and another cool moment. I remember my freshman year, I had just been inserted into the starting lineup and we're playing BU in Boston. And so we come out and BU doesn't really know me because I'm kind of a new starter. And next thing you know, I get an open shot, bam. Make a long story short, it's 12-12. BU calls timeout. I have the first 12 points for our team. So I come to the bench and I'm really hyper because I have 12 points in the first 4 minutes. And Chappelle is just staring at me. So finally I realize he's staring at me. I go, "What?" He goes, "You're not playing Fort Kent right now." So I think I only scored 2 more rest of the game, but I had the first 12. So it's moments like that are pretty special, to think coming from a small area, we're not really known for producing the Division I athletes. It so kind of goes to show that anybody could do it.
Yeah, and your family produced too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So before we get up out of here, I always give my guests a chance to just say their last piece before we get up out of here. So the floor is yours. Anything you want to say, anything we missed, now's your chance to go ahead and speak on it.
Yeah, I'd like to, Tom, the first thing I want to do is thank you for what you do with this podcast, to give people a voice from all over the state. I love the way you do it. You do an outstanding job, total class act, getting different perspectives, different males, females. It's outstanding and it's successful, and it's something that is really needed. And I'm so glad that you do it and you do it so well. So I want to thank you for that, not just for having me on, but for doing this, to give a lot of recognition for a lot of athletes that our state has produced, and particularly in Aroostook County, which is sometimes underrepresented. So the last thing I'd like to say is the role that my faith in Jesus has played in my life and raising my family and just trying to be a role model is the most important thing in my life. So that's how I would close.
Absolutely. So thank you for coming on. I can tell, and you spoke on it about how just the Valley, how much it means to you. And same thing, anytime I can talk about the Valley or talk about the county or bring people on from the county, like those are the things I'm most proud of. We've got a ton of talented people up there, and I think the rest of the state kind of sleeps on us a little bit, but you know, it's a great place to live, great place to grow up. And
I agree, my man.
As we just talked about for almost 2 hours on air, we got talent up there. So
yeah, we do.
Thank you everyone for watching this week's episode of Big Time the Podcast, and make sure you're checking out all the previous episodes on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's all over the place, so check those out. But we'll see you next week with another Big Time episode. Thank you.